Hello, everyone. Welcome to CSA Talks. Today, we are hosting dear Martin Lindstrom, and he's helping companies to transform their business and culture. He's an author, and he's in the 100 influential honor list of Time Magazine, and he's a columnist at Fast Company, Time Magazine, and Harvard Business Review. And he has books called Small Data, The Minister of Common Sense, and Buyology. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you. It's great to connect with you.
Yeah, it is great. Martin, I would like to ask you a very important question about the market economy, because the consumer habits have been shifting because of this pandemic. Now we question, while we're buying something, if we really need it or not. How is it going to affect the market economy in the next, 5 years?
Well, we're going to spend money. Don't be concerned about that. But we're going to spend them on different things than what we did pre-COVID-19. So here's what's so fascinating about this whole thing. If you go back in history, you would notice that in the world of marketing, we had a term called entry points. In fact, we have 7 entry points throughout life. An entry point was when you moved away from home. Suddenly you're going to IKEA, buying new furniture and got new friends. An entry point would be when you're expecting a newborn baby. Suddenly there would be baby strollers everywhere and you would be very sort of excited about that. These different entry points were defining our lives. And for the first time in living memory, we now are predicting an 8th entry point. That is a global synchronized behavioral change, which means that we're almost going on a different track altogether. And there's sort of 3 things characterizing that. The first thing this is defining the 8th entry point is our lack of touch. Remember, we've all been locked in. We haven't been in close proximity with anyone. So we really are sensory-wise understimulated. That's the reason why depression is happening right now, because we know there's a direct correlation between the degree of touch and our degree of self-worth. So what's happening is that people will buy much more tactile things. We saw the sales of dogs and pets go up 230% over the last year alone. Pet food, the same. And of course, that creates this whole ripple effect. You need to have a dog house, you need to have a fenced garden, whatever you need to have. You can see how you have an entry point happening here. But we also see that people are not going to collect products and items to the same degree as we did before. I call that the time capsule syndrome. And really what it means is that the millennials increasingly have become much older than any other generation throughout this whole process. What do I mean about that? Well, as you've been stuck inside for the first time ever, a very young generation have learned that they are not invincible. Or at least they come to a realization they can die. So for the first time ever, I've heard young people talk about a bucket list. This is what I want to do before I die. I mean, that's an 18-year-old kid saying that, which is kind of crazy. And that meant that the younger generation now are building up the momentum to what do they want to do when they're released out of this whole COVID-19 lockdown. So we will see travel, of course. We'll see concerts. We'll see one-off moments in your life. We'll see theater plays and festivals. All that stuff will take off in a degree you never ever seen before. So there will be this experience economy where you buy things of emotions, which is emotional and is not physical, take off much more. And I think the last thing we'll see is, of course, the distance work will continue to be very prominent because companies have reshuffled their businesses now. They don't have as much office space anymore. It's difficult to fly still, all these restrictions. And by the way, they've learned that you can actually save money by having people working from home. So that means everything which is kind of replacing going to the office is now going to become a booming item. Everything from lawnmowers to garden equipment to home decoration, office materials, cameras at home, all that stuff will really take off. So this is going to define the economy. So we will spend the same amount of money, most likely, perhaps even more, but it will be on different items.
Yeah, very good news for the companies who would like to earn money, actually. Yes, and I think we're going to collect more memories in the near future instead of, products. And you mentioned about the generations, and this area is quite charming for me because, I'm raising two kids and they're in Z generation, and alphas came, in all over the world. We are trying to understand them. And they're very conscious, environmental conscious generation. They really care about the companies, activities in terms of diversity, pollution, climate change. What kind of tactics companies needs to apply in order to attract this new huge consumer group?
I think the most important thing to realize is that you have to develop a brand purpose. A brand purpose is why you're here beside making money. I think a lot of companies are acting in the old school way where we want to make our shareholders happy. Well, these days are long gone. And today you need to ask yourself, what do I do which is improving the lives of the well-being of certain groups beside making money? And that quite often will have to be linked with environmental friendly views of life. What's important to understand here is you can't just put makeup on a company and pretend like it's supporting an environment. You really have to go deep, and you really have to basically fundamentally change your business platform. And that's very, very difficult if you've been operating in a certain industry where perhaps the environmental focus has not been very strong because this is how you've done it the last 50 years. Well, you need to create what I call a bridge. A bridge is really where you say to yourself, we have some brand equity, we have some goodwill among our customers. Let's make that become even stronger and use that as a temporary bridge with certain initiatives, which is showing that we do our best to get our house in order. And then underneath, you really rebuild your whole platform to make sure it's supporting the environment and other causes similar to this. So if you take really established companies like Lego, I mean, they have a bridge which is lasting between 5 and 7 years at the moment, which is making all their plastic toys 100% sustainable. Now, this is a huge move. I mean, 100% of their product portfolio basically is in one way or another based on plastic, and which means oil. Yeah. And they know that even though people and parents love the toy product, they also know at the end of the day, at some point, someone will ask that really nasty question, what about them being such a big manufacturer of plastic stuff on planet Earth, right? Yeah. So they are working on it. But beside that, what they're doing is that they're creating small bridges. And bridges is that they continue to create emotional activities which are bonding the consumer and the brand together, so they can migrate slowly away. You as a company owner have to come to a very simple realization. There is no way around. You have to do it. It's just a matter about when, and it cannot be 20 years from now because then you're out of business. Mm-hmm. So this is a serious issue. It's the next generation we talk about, and it is the planet, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. Actually, I really wonder what is going on in the future. It is a very big question mark in my mind. There are, of course, too many signs around us. Futurists are talking about the future and the products. And this user experience and customer experience, I think, quite important for all of us, especially for the companies. In order to make their product sustainable, how can they use this UX, CX thing? And also, I would like to ask you, within the next 10 years, next decade, which products will complete their life cycle, do you think?
I think, first of all, it's important to understand that consumers will say one thing and they will do another thing. And these two things are not necessarily aligned. So if you do a huge quantitative study where you ask people if they're willing to pay more buying your product, most people will say yes if it supports the environment. That's not necessarily the case. And I remember many years ago where there was a study done around eggs, free-range eggs versus caged chickens, right? And the study basically showed that people are very, very willing to pay more for these free-ranged eggs. The reality was, yes, that was true, 1 cent more per egg. So quite often there's this discrepancy. So you should, as a business owner, start to understand where are people willing to pay more. And it may not be straightforward. It actually may be on other adjacency type of services where they feel a stronger degree of emotional attachment. So what I'm saying right now is if you have a core product, it may be that you actually can't charge much more on that core product, but maybe you create adjacency products, similar products which are offering additional services, we actually can charge more because people are not used to figure out what the higher, lower price point is in that new category. So there you can win things. And then of course you have on the core product where you can't charge more because people are so used to a certain price point. So you need to understand the customer journey and you need to understand where is it you should charge more in order to justify becoming more environmental friendly, because I don't need to tell you, at the end of the day, this costs money. And yes, you can cut into the bottom line, and some companies for sure are forced to do that and should do that. But the majority of companies are working on such a small market, it's really, really difficult to get out of that. And that's the reason why you can only get through this through innovation, developing other things. And I'll give you an example of that. So, for example, one client we have is one of the largest players in the respiratory field. So if you have asthma or whatever, now the core product is good. It's a very solid product. They can't charge much more because it's regulated. But what they can do is to develop an app. And the app can tell you what the weather conditions are outside before you go out, and therefore how many puffs you have to take from this respiratory disease device before you leave home. Now, there you can earn the money to justify changing the products, i.e. the plastic use, the ozone coming out of the product and all this stuff. So that's where you use innovation to charge more for something else to justify you changing to become more environmental friendly, right?
Wow, thank you so much. It's a very nice explanation. Yeah, we became the app-driven people. We live with our apps. They tell us everything, the weather, the market, the news, and everything. And I'm addicted of some of them, by the way. And I'm sure they use our data. Oh, thank you so much, Martin. There is one more question, one last question I ask to everyone. It's my classical now. I would like to ask you, if you could go back 10 years with your today's experience and know-how, what would you do differently in your life?
I probably think that I would have dialed up my focus on creating my own media outlets. And I would, because of that, created a much better distance work type of studio. So COVID-19 definitely has helped me to understand how to deal with client and client cases on a distance. What we've done is not only that we deal with a ton of clients around the world through our studios here, among others in Switzerland, but we also today are setting up studio arrangement with some of our media partners. So for example, today I run a show with Newsweek, which is a larger publication in the United States, and we do another partnership with another major media outlet. These things we began about a year ago to build up. We should have done that 10 years ago. So I probably would have been more focused on creating my own media outlet, because in the future, what you will notice happening is that every company will actually become a media house. And they will take, to some extent, the media control away from the classic outlet and actually become the owner of that content and control the media stream better. I think a lot of companies now are realizing that that's the only way they can secure airtime. The problem is that you don't have the audience, because it takes time to develop an audience. Now, I'm lucky I have a very large audience, but if I would have began this process perhaps 10 years ago, it probably would have been very different. So that would be the one thing I would have done differently.
Yeah, yeah, it is not very easy to increase the audience nowadays. There are too many influencers, too many economists, futurists, and everywhere. But you are one of them, the worth to follow, and I follow you. And thank you for your very, inspiring speech and the information you shared with us today. Hope to see you in London one day.
Thank you. That would be wonderful. I'm sure that we will see each other and hug each other so we can be reminded about how it is to be a human being again, right? It was a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Bye, Martin.
Bye-bye.